Colin, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Well, welcome to you, and thank you very much for asking me to be part of the show.
Yes, how are things on your end? How are you?
Excellent. Just come off
Yeah,
a very busy few weeks of travel, and I think many people would know I've been at Cannes, but I've also been at lots of other events as well.
yeah,
So it's a week here in my home office to knuckle down and start kind of building out for the next couple of months.
yeah. So, Colin, you're a digital commerce expert, being in the marketing side of things and overall operations of e-commerce for many years. You speak a lot about various topics in e-commerce, marketing channels, retail media. Maybe for the audience or for the listeners who don't know you, maybe you can start by sharing about your background and your expertise in e-commerce.
Sure. Yep. Well, if you ask me what do I do, I always say, but my trade is I'm a marketing guy by trade, and
Hmm.
I've actually worked in marketing across the globe in Australia, Asia, UK, and Europe, obviously in a variety of roles. In fact, my very first proper job was head of marketing for a retailer in Australia, and so Australia is very close to my heart, but also
Hmm.
retailing is very close to my heart, and over the last sort of 10 or 15 years, I've done a couple of things, but one is as a CMO, I've worked with airlines as a marketing director for airlines. But one of the things you do within an airline is how do you monetize your existing traffic? And then actually between sort of 2016 up as far as 21, I was marketing director for a company that sold technology to airlines, and
Hmm.
many aspects of it were essentially digital commerce, but for airlines. So how do you monetize your existing traffic? How do you increase your profitability per user, or in this case per seat, up from say the normal profit per seat is €6 for or $6 for an airline, and working the technology we had, you'd be able to increase the basket size to say 50, 60, $70, depending on how you do it.
Wow.
But my side hustle, Eitan, has always been teaching and training for the last 15 years, which I always loved. And
Hmm.
on the back of that, I helped set up marketing conferences. And then I found much later in life that I could actually write and present. So the teaching has been the side hustle that's been kind of now much more of what I do because I love it so much. And then from that, then I do a lot of writing and content creation.
Hmm. So you mentioned you have a retail experience, you have a technology experience, obviously e-commerce, and you mentioned that you teach, you also write. What else do you do these days? It seems that you're encompassing all your expertise into various roles and consulting gigs that you're doing, right?
Well, I would say to the audience, one of the things that happens is I get asked the odd time about this career stuff, and it's kind of interesting because they also ask me for career advice as well. And one of the things I would say is, a lot of career advice is quite generic, but I had a specific plan, which was that I work as a career marketer, but what I do is I developed a series of expertise. And what I say to people when they ask me is you've got to become what's called technically what's known casually, I should say, is a T-shaped person. So a
Hmm.
person who's got, good at various topics, but has got a lot of expertise in one particular area. But actually, what I'm saying to people is you want to be sort of pie shaped. So you'll remember pie from our maths lessons when we were a
Sure.
kid. So you want to have 2 to 3 different sort of capabilities, as well as the kind of thing that you're pretty good at. Now, the reason I say that is that the world doesn't reward generalists, and the world rewards specialists, because generalists can actually be usurped by ChatGPT, whereas expertise won't be usurped. And so it's actually something I took to heart for my own career, because there's lots of marketing people out there in the world, but there's not that many marketing people who understand retail, understand digital commerce, and then can combine that to understand retail media, but also then can do one other thing, which is assemble these thoughts into a sort of coherent format that people can understand and work with them.
Yeah.
And so that has always been the sort of the backbone of my career, but it's also something I would say to your audience, which is to combine things to be excellent at them, as well as be the kind of like a good accountant or a good marketing person or a good retailer, but actually develop expertise within that and then apply that expertise. Ideally, at something that comes quite naturally to you. One of the things I do is a lot of public speaking, and it comes very naturally to me, and it's not that much of a stretch for me. partly
Hmm.
because I've done so much teaching and training. So you build on the things you're naturally good at and go from there.
Yes. So you mentioned the role of a CMO, and obviously there is a lot of developments in the job description of CMOs these days, right? I mean, there's a lot of discussion if CMO, right, is required, if CMOs are need to change their roles. And CMO of like 5 years ago, 10 years ago is probably not relevant for the future of CMOs. How do you see the evolution of the CMO role, in an
That's a great
organization?
question. I haven't been a marketing director or CMO for a long period of time.
Hmm.
I see these come through. And some of this now, I would say, also depends on your sort of orientation. And let me explain that a little bit more. My orientation as a CMO is that you should always be very commercially driven.
Hmm.
Where if you read in the trade press, you'll think it's all about being brand driven or creative driven. But all of those are in service of one particular thing, which is to drive the revenue of an organization and hopefully drive the P&L of an organization, regardless of whether that's B2B or B2C. And so the first thing I always say is what the role of the CMO is changing, but the role of being a commercially driven person and a commercially driven marketer, I should say, is never changed. But it's the tools and the techniques to drive that revenue is actually what's changing. And if we just frame ourselves back over the last sort of 15 to 20 years, we've gone from if we take the marketing mix, the 4Ps. Many of those 4Ps have changed, and not the content of the 4Ps has changed. Let me explain that. How we do product has changed in a world that's more digitally driven rather than a product that I can touch and feel like
Hmm.
this. So the sort of digitization of product has meant that we have to change how we think about our marketing roles. Secondly, we've been able to get a lot more sophisticated in our pricing compared to, say, just doing something purely at retail. An example of that is actually my former trade in the airline business, which is dynamic pricing. And I believe we're going to see a lot more dynamic pricing in the future. But obviously, B2B SaaS models are an element of
Hmm.
brand, not new, but a slightly different approach to pricing. Um, and if we look at obviously distribution has changed radically. The place part of 4Ps, and that's obviously changed radically because we can download or get distributed through digital commerce products directly to our door. And finally, obviously, the promotional aspect. And the promotional aspect is the bit that gets a lot of the publicity. It's the one that's the sexiest bit, if you will. But really, partly the reason for that is that really, we had a kind of fairly static model of channels we could advertise, promote through over until maybe 20 years ago.
Hmm.
And then with the advent of Google AdWords, subsequently followed by, and obviously within that, a subset of search engine optimization and then email as a tool to capture and acquire and convert customers. Then we move on to Facebook and social media advertising. And then it's just been only exponentially changed in terms of lots of different channels using digital and so on. With the latest sort of combination within that is the digital commerce for a retailer to capture and acquire customers online, or delivering through the store or direct to the consumer. And then as per my comment about the airline business, monetizing that traffic through retail media. So the role of the CMO, which is the original question, has now changed so much because they've got to understand different ways of doing the 4Ps, but also the technology that underpins them. And that is really the challenge, because part of the CMO's role now is to understand the capabilities of technology as it pertains to driving the commercial realities of an organization.
Yes, it seems that we're all overwhelmed by the amount of market tech out there, right? Every organization is using dozens of different tools, and there is no patience and no capacity for additional tools. So that's something that definitely you mentioned on the technology side of marketing implementation and technologies around that, and also in terms of the consumers, right? Consumers, like, there are new generation of consumers that is emerging, right? The more younger people, like call them Gen Zs, or they are more concerned about social aspects of a purchase, more concerned about sustainability, right? Climate change, more concerned about authenticity, right? So it's not longer those fully polished advertisement, and it's more about, like, being authentic and just deliver the messages in the right way. And a brand must have more values for beyond the standard product, right? And the differentiation of brands is going to be probably in different categories than they used to be, in previous
Well,
years. So,
there's actually a two. What's the word? There's a sort of Janus-like kind of perspective going on here. The using the Greek, I think it was a Greek
yeah.
god, of looking two different heads, and how do we combine this idea that where we believe that this current generation of customers coming through who have lived their life through a screen, if you will. It's a bit of a broad generalization, but you get the point. Who've lived their life through a screen and who purportedly buy into the idea of authenticity and sustainability, and yet every store in Primark has a queue at the door, as does H&M, and the fastest growing digital commerce brand in the world over the last few years has been Temu and Shein.
Yeah.
And so this sort of slightly contradictory perspective is something that we have to live with, and it's going to be a continuation because, what's really going on there's two of the 4 Ps in action, which is I've got incredibly low prices and I've got immediate satisfaction happening through distribution. And this is part of the dichotomy that's happening in the world, which is we say one thing and we do another.
Yes. Interesting. So how do you see, the marketing activities and overall, the what's changing in marketing and specifically around digital commerce? And I wanted to ask you, I mean, you've been in various industry and you've decided to focus in the last few years on digital commerce and those various channels, obviously, and marketplaces and retail media. What's so exciting for you in this specific domain, and how do you see the evolution of marketing
That's a
within this
great
domain?
question. Yep. One of the things that I'm kind of interested in is well, there's probably only one benefit of being slightly older, and it's that you can remember things, and that's about it. Okay, and even that sometimes is questionable whether your actually memory is really playing tricks with you or not. But the benefit I have is that I can remember the dawn of sort of like in 2000 when the idea of doing things online through the internet and what that could do, and finding that very, very interesting and going, wow, this really is like, wow, this is going to be a sea change. But for years thereafter, particularly after the dot-com crash, people were like, no, that stuff never took off and it will never take off. But in the meantime, all the other work was actually happening. And Google AdWords, the auction-based system, was launched in 2002. It became essentially the greatest money-making entrepreneurial idea in the history of the world in terms of value creation and in terms of share price and in terms of number of millionaires. And that spawned the capability to do e-commerce and capture customers online. It also spawned essentially the Facebook model as well. So that was the kind of V1 up as far as social, which was kind of V2. And we're just nearing at the end of version 2 of the internet. And I think we're moving on to version 3.0 of the internet, which would be combines a couple of things. One is we've got a level of maturity that everybody understands what's going on. Secondly, we've got these phones that are very high powered, that have 4 to 5G, almost no matter where you are in the world. And we've got a lot of apps that enable a lot of these capabilities, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Facebook, whatever it may be. And now we're entering the third phase where we're going to now grow to another level of capabilities within all of that, simply because the technologies are more mature. That MarTech that we talked about earlier on is now in place to help scale. But also there's this idea that is very interesting idea. It's what's called internet scale. So internet scale, where I live, back 20 years ago, to go and do something, I would have had to say open up a store, and I would have to buy products for that store, and I'd have to sign a lease for 20 years, and then I'd be in debt to the tune of $250,000 before I made one sale. Because now, with combination that we understand how startups work, and we have technology like Shopify, and we have AdWords, we have Facebook, we can be up and running by the end of this particular podcast and have an e-commerce store live in 30 minutes and, drop ship to people if you want to do so. So the capabilities are there to reach everybody in the world, more or less. And obviously with Zoom on the B2B side, capabilities to go and meet people around the world that we just really didn't do properly 5 years ago. And this is where we're facing, how we're facing the future. And this is why I focus a lot on digital commerce and retail media, because they're all internet scale businesses that actually will change radically the role of marketing, change radically the role of retailers, change the role of MarTech, and create a whole new series of job opportunities that simply didn't exist even 5 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, and you see the evolution of Shopify, or let's say, as you said, within 30 minutes, we can launch an e-commerce platform. Doesn't matter if it's Shopify or any other provider. But in parallel, we see growth of other channels like social commerce, and TikTok Shop is all over, and the ability to purchase almost anywhere, right? So traditionally, as a brand, you wanted to have your own. Maybe you started with Amazon, and then the evolution was, okay, let's build our own Shopify store.com, start engaging directly with the users, upselling. And then today you have so many options, right? Let's call them communities. You have the, Amazon kind of things. You have the social commerce. You have your own .com. There are so many options. Obviously, others like on B2B. How do you see like 2024 and forward for the next few years? Where is some of the interesting channels or areas of opportunities for e-commerce brands?
Well, I think what we need is, first of all, to have flexibility in terms of our approach and our thinking around channels. And part of the reason I say that is many of these initial channels that come through look like toys initially. I mean, we're all old enough to remember TikTok because it's not that around a long time, obviously. Yeah. And initially, what was TikTok? Silly dance routines and, cheesy things and so on. Now it's essentially, I think it's one of the largest driver of health and beauty e-commerce customer acquisitions in the world.
Yeah.
For nothing in 3 years. And, should we be surprised? Because it's got this incredible visual capability. It's distributed. It's sort of democratized. Anybody can do it if you want to use that word. And what I would say, like TikTok, Shein, Temu is a harbinger of how things are going to be, because it's going to be what I like to call content, commerce, and creativity all intertwined. And instead of this kind of like, if you will, formal customer funnel, not that it was ever as formal as I'm about to say it, but where we have awareness, consideration, and conversion and retention, whatever way you want to structure your customer funnel. And if you believe that it was more formal in terms of a decision making by the customer, the shopper, now we have this sort of like little sort of what we're going to put it. It feels a little bit more circular, or where you can come in with enter that funnel with creativity, enter that funnel with commerce, and so on. Let me give you an example. I gave 4 case studies in Cannes of this idea of content creativity mixed together. And in fact, one of them was from ASOS, and they are distributed through over 100 countries in the world. And the particular case study that I worked with ASOS on was to bring to light was around the American Brazilian brand called Sol de Janeiro. I'm hoping I didn't butcher the pronunciation, because the J isn't soft in this case here, unlike normally in Portuguese. And that business is built on influencers, and that business is built on TikTok. And it's gone from 40 million, 50 million, I think, in 2020 to where now it's, since their acquisition by Occitan, is now well over 500 million, as in 500 million. And more recently, they've been working with the likes of ASOS to go build out their brand in the UK. And it's a combination of incredible visuals that the ASOS Media Group created for them, combined with the immediate availability of that product, with lots of, if you will, content kind of scaled around that. And that's why I speak a lot more in terms of this idea of content, commerce, and creativity mixing together within a channel. Yes. And it's a good description. It's not a perfect description, but it's used like, I use it like that to explain it as a completely different way of how we would have been talking about, say, doing TV ads or doing like print ads in, Vogue magazine and so on. It's a very different dynamic, particularly for health and beauty. In fact, for your listeners, one of the things I would say is keep an eye on all the health and beauty stuff that's happening there, because they're the cutting edge. They're the harbinger of where all the other brands will go, because they've got slightly higher margins. They're very innovation driven, and the turnaround times are very fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So, from your background experience and the focus on marketing and commerce, what is the best, or let's say, like best practices or processes that you try to teach, brand and students around, let's say, launching new products in a certain geography? What are the major steps that you feel are very, very relevant in today's, uh, you know, market? Because it seems that like every product has so much competition. It's very difficult to be first, right? It probably used to be easier a few years back. Today, everything is faster. The ability to source product, to manufacture, everything is so relatively easy. So what are your best tips, or the processes that you can identify to launch
That's
a
a
new
great
product
question.
in the market?
Yeah. Well, I kind of what I do is I take a step back, and let me explain why.
Good
The
start.
benefit of doing the benefit of doing a lot of the since I did my MBA, whatever it was, 15 years ago, one of the things they do very well is talk about strategy. And I would have said I'm actually a bit of a hypocrite, because what I would tend to do is just dive into things and do things and kind of fall into things I would have done before, because it wasn't lazy. It was just like, well, here's how we do things around here.
Mm-hmm.
But over the last 10 years, as I've been teaching a lot more in terms of marketing and marketing strategy, what I've realized is that the first port of call, which is like an assessment of the situation, diagnosis, if you will, is now much more important than ever. And part of this diagnosis before choosing strategy and objectives is because of what you just said there, which is that the market's getting more competitive. There's a lot more competition, there's a lot more choice, there's a lot more noise, there's a lot more channels. And so therefore we have to go be radically honest with ourselves about assessing the situation. Part of that can be changed, the dynamic, if you will, can be changed by the fact that we apply innovation in terms of our thinking about the product, and also innovation in terms of we think about our go-to-market. And hence why there was so much new opportunity created by TikTok and created by influence, because it was a new way to acquire customers, a newish way to acquire customers.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of making your choices, what I'm saying today is diagnose and be blunt with yourself, because there's a lot of time we can lie to ourselves. I can lie to myself that I look like Brad Pitt, but the reality is that's possibly not true. Yeah. So what we have to do is be very blunt with ourselves in terms of our diagnosis. That includes, what's my realistic budget? What's my realistic objective here? What's the thing we're trying to do? What do my management or investors want me to do?
Mm-hmm.
What can we do? And what are we trying to do within a certain timescale? That's when you can create a realistic strategy and objectives. But within that, what I say is, once you do that, then you've got to obviously get the right product in the right place with the right distribution. Let me explain why I say that. I work with a good few food startups, and they were very gung-ho on all sorts of stuff around influencers, and very gung-ho, all sorts of things they wanted to do. But the reality is the customer couldn't find the product in store. And indeed, one of the case studies that I mentioned in Cannes is a fantastic female-founded brand that is a really amazing wellness product that drives protein and collagen together.
Mm-hmm.
But her number one problem isn't the fact that she's got a great product, which she has. Isn't the product that the design isn't a problem that the design isn't up to scratch, which it is, and it's a good price. It's like distribution, as with any startup. So you've got to be realistic about what you're trying to do, because what happens is we could do this, we can do that, the other, but that kind of doesn't matter if the customer can't find the products. I've always been obsessed, by the way, with distribution as a key part. So when I'm talking to people, I say, diagnose yourself, be radically honest with yourself. Choose the strategy based on what you can do with the product and the distribution that you've got. Then and only then do you choose the activation models that you're going to use. Now, I want to take a sidebar on this. I want to be very specific. You'll see a lot of marketing books behind me here. And you'll see a lot of stuff around, say, things like how brands grow, building distinctive assets, and all the rest of it. And what I say is we have to take these concepts and apply them to our situation. Many of the works that we see out there talking about marketing are actually for brands with mass distribution and mass brand awareness already in place.
Exactly.
But you're going to apply to, Lewis Food Corporation that has just 2 months of products, 2 months of, live online and 2 months, 2 products. It's a completely different thing. Yeah. So again, your circumstances change the activation model you're going to have, which therefore change the execution. So activation model comes before execution. Now, to wrap up this point, where did I always start? A bunch of ideas around activation and a bunch of ideas around execution. And I didn't think through where we were coming from in the first place. And it's essentially the original sin of many brands, which is they take models they've seen elsewhere, they come up with a lot of activation plans, and they don't really think through the realities of the situation.
Yes. I mean, even to companies, to brands with the same product line targeting the same audience, they have probably customer sentiment which is completely different, and they cannot copy marketing strategies for one another. Each brand, each company has its unique history, unique DNA, and obviously unique things that they need to do. And I really like what you said as a first step. Let's step back, right, and think and do some research. And it seems that the research part before investing and go to China and try to manufacture something and getting all these samples, and it's about validating and researching and like lose early, right?
Yeah.
And it's so much easier these days to do all these research because all the communities and all the social networks, and spend time on researching and try to validate your solution and get some early adapters and see if it makes sense to launch.
Well,
It's
this ties
very,
into
very
the idea
important.
that the question you asked me earlier, which is, where are we today? What should we do? 20 years ago, longer, whatever, if you and I were trying to launch a new product, we'd probably have to commit to it a good bit in advance. And we'd have to do an initial order, get it into our little store, and then hope to God the bloody thing sold. Yeah. And the big benefit of the whole lean thinking, lean startup approach,
Lean startup,
is that applying aspects of that to how we think about our own products in a different realm, the consumer world or even food products, is we're still trying to get product market fit. We're still trying to match the two, and don't go to the casino in Vegas and put it all down in red. Actually be iterating from that, and that's actually one of the key bits that is so different now about the world we're in today compared to even say 15 years ago.
It seemed that those technology go-to-market strategies like the lean startup that you mentioned, it's all about MVP, quickly launch within few months, get some feedback and iterate quickly to adapt to specific customer requirements and feature set. This model is what I see is being adopted also on the brand side, right? Having this MVP quickly without any big investment, take it to the market, try to validate with their adapters and see if there is a need. So that's
well,
definitely.
I've got a specific example of that, which is, this is why I like the idea of digital commerce and retail media a lot more. And so let me just back up why I say that. So if I'm a retailer, let's say I'm in the UK, I'm a Tesco, and in France, I'm Carrefour, or I'm Kroger in the US, or SuperValu in Ireland, or Woolworths in Australia, or Coles in Australia. That's the one thing we want to be known for. We want to be known as having innovative products matching to the new customers that are out there. We want people who, we know the market is very interested in healthcare products, healthy beauty, fresh food, and so on, and fitness and health. And so, but we can't go and run off and spend 10 million developing a product, getting the packaging right, putting it out into the market, and then it flops, because this is the conversation all the time. Oh, innovation, all the products fail. Well, I always say with that, the world of retail media can actually solve for that. And hence why I'm very excited about it in the context of innovation. So let me explain. Let's say it's the a new chocolate, Colin's chocolate, to make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Colin's chocolate is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I have no money. So I'm not going to go and spend 10 million on developing it. I'm going to go and develop one pallet load, test driving the product, and it's called Colin's chocolates, and it's got red packaging. And why have I developed that? Well, because I've gone to a retailer and found that what customers are searching for is the word chocolate and then organic. And I know how many searches that is. And that's, say, nominally for the purpose of this discussion, that's 10,000 searches a month across 5 markets. Great. Well, I can go buy the ad that targets the customer who's looking for organic chocolate with Colin's organic chocolate, or Colin's chocolate that's organic nut with nuts in it, whatever you want to call it, and I can put that in front of the customer and test if there's a reaction. Content, commerce, and creativity all matched together.
Actually, launching a smaller campaign, having a landing page, checkout, everything is there, right? And can be done very, very fast at almost zero cost, right?
Yeah, and if it doesn't work,
I
haven't lost my shirt. Yeah.
Yes.
That's why retail media is very interesting, because you can do that and partner with the retailer who also wants new products there.
Mm-hmm. So you are actually combining those two, like combining retail media with this practice of validating and launching your products. So because the retailer also wants to utilize his real estate, his inventory, looking for new products, and want to test probably together with you.
Yeah. Well, it tied in with that, Eitan, is the what is the problem for a small brand? They don't have tons of working capital. They can't even do things like, let's say Tesco came in tomorrow and said, hey, Colin's chocolate, give us like 20 pallet loads of that.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. I'm going to be bankrupt because I get paid whatever 2-3 months later.
Yeah.
But the way one particular brand retailer I work with, instead of just doing one pallet, they'll do a slice of a pallet. And that slice of a pallet means that you can actually, on both sides, on the retailer and on the brand side, take a low-risk approach to see if the punter wants it or the shopper wants it, and then go from there. So, that's why I'm pretty excited about the future, because we can actually have more innovations tapping into niche markets that are low risk.
Interesting. So maybe just launching kind of a micro brands, right?
And it could be it could be like a Christmas thing, like a Christmas or, a Halloween or an Easter thing. The opportunity for flexibility is built into the model. And that's why I kind of go, well, a lot of the models, we're looking backwards at how the world was. We're not looking forward to how the world can be. Mm-hmm. So if I, was that sort of person who could dance around on TikTok and launch a new product, I could essentially build awareness and consideration kind of overnight. I mean, I'm making a few broad stroke statements here, but I could build brand awareness and consideration very fast, which in theory then I could turn that into conversion. We just simply didn't have that 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. We still have people talking at the moment about how the only way to build a brand is through television ads. I'm still scratching my head as to why people are still buying into this whole idea when we can do the same thing and do something completely different, build better products, build better jobs, focus on, new type of startups that build different type of capabilities into the market.
Interesting. Colin, specifically for retail media, give us, share with us the opportunity here for from the retailer side and from the brand side. Okay, what's the future of retail media and how do you see this evolving from both aspects of the brands and retailers?
As you know, I'm excited by retail media for reasons we just talked about there. But there's two elements, as you rightly explained. There's what's in it for the retailers and what they should do, and then there's what's in it for the brands. So on the retailer side, obviously, there's things that we know a little bit about retail media, which is the opportunity for the retailers to break out from their current low margin business, which is 2 and 3% margins across all, particularly grocery retailers in the world, slightly higher for other types of retailers. So to add a new business that will drive new forms of revenue for them. Now, I'm making some statements here that sound like it's very easy. It's not very easy. I'm working with a bunch of retailers to help them set up the retail media networks.
Very slow moving.
It's
right?
slow moving,
complicated,
tough, and there's tech and there's existing people involved, but
Yeah.
the principle and the excitement about it should not be underestimated. We've got, I would argue, it's going to happen regardless. And the reason I would say that is that the model within retailers of trade marketing, where we would have used negotiated hard on contracts with suppliers, and then use that money to say that we're going to actually shift the product in the store, shopper marketing, trade marketing. That world is going to go, and gradually shrink. And the reason very simple, which is we all know now through pixels and through everything else that we can measure everything. So why should, as I shift to the brand side, why should the brands continue to give money into trade marketing? Why should the brands continue to give tons of money into shopper marketing if it's not measured? What retail media does is enable you to be measured. So from the brand side, they get to do innovation, as we touched on earlier, but they also get to measure the impact of their results. The fancy word for it is closed loop measurement. Not everybody offers this, but you can see how a brand working with a retailer can go, instead of giving you money for trade marketing where I don't get the results and I get some amorphous numbers, and abstract numbers that are not tied in with sales. This way I can actually give you money to sell through your channels, in store, online, and use maybe offsite capabilities to drive revenues. And that is a radical change from the past. And it's driven by MarTech at its core, ad tech in particular.
This is obviously related to iOS 14, cookie deprecation, loss of first-party data. So here is another opportunity for brands to access this first-party data through retail media, right?
Once you've signal loss through, your former big channels, your Facebooks and your Googles and so on, where are you? But also tied in with that as well, Google and Facebook are sort of removed to a certain extent. Once removed from the fact is that the retailer is where there is the customer for many brands, not the shopper. And the shopper is one step removed. They don't pay the salary of the consumer good brand. That's done by the retailer. And so therefore, working with the retailer, whether they're big online or big in store and a small bit online, using technologies that enable you to measure how you partner together is a radical change compared to even 5 years ago.
Yes. Great, Colin. So on a different subject, you worked in many countries, right? In Europe, in Africa, in Asia. Obviously, you mentioned Australia. Where do you feel is a very interesting market, and in terms of, let's say, e-commerce, digital commerce, and quality of life?
Well, the area I spent a good bit of time working in China between 2016 and 2021, and the way I kind of see the world is that the foremost e-commerce market in the world is China, followed a little bit by the US. Fast coming up, say places like in Latin America and so on, which are going straight from using the likes of Mercado Libre and so on to go straight to big digital commerce businesses. But what I would say the most exciting places in the world to me to work in and see where it's happening is in Asia and in the Gulf countries, like say Dubai or whatever, and because they're just gone straight to app usage, and they're doing things that are cutting edge, that are kind of pretty much ahead of many things in Europe. Because in Europe we went through the cycle of dial-up, browser-based, laptop-based, whereas they went straight to 3 and 4G and 5G phones. So they're actually more at the cutting edge. So 75% think of all advertising in China as digital advertising. So if you want to see how the future is going to pan out, you look at what's happening in Asia.
Exactly. And obviously the share of e-commerce or digital commerce out of overall retail, right, is very, very high compared to Western world. Great, Colin. So this is the part of the episode where I ask my guest about a fun fact they want to share with us.
The fun fact it's quite well known if anybody reads my socials that I'm motorsport obsessed and car obsessed. My dad was a mechanic, and so all I've known my whole life is sitting down, working and reading and thinking about cars.
Wow.
And I race my own cars, and essentially, I like to say that everything I do is just a front to go fund my motor racing. And so if people are very silly and have no common sense, please send me all your money so I can go more and do more motorsport. It's an ideal use of all your life savings.
Now we understand the hidden agenda of everything that we're discussing,
All,
right?
all a hidden agenda. I'll give you my Swiss bank account or my, my Bitcoin account, so you can send me all your life savings and more, and so I can continue motor racing.
Great, Colin. Great. Thank you for sharing that. So where people can find you, Colin?
Well, you can find me on Twitter and I still call it Twitter, by the way, at
Mhm.
Colin A. Lewis, A in the middle, as in the letter A. You can find me on LinkedIn just by searching Colin Lewis. And if you search Colin Lewis Marketing on Google, you'll find me as well. There is actually another Colin Lewis who used to be a professional cyclist. And I can tell you, I am not a professional cyclist. So don't confuse the two of us.
Okay.
And get in touch. I mean, definitely follow me on LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn as my kind of main sort of approach. When you're looking at my LinkedIn, it's not really a pitch thing. It's kind of really what I'm thinking about at that time. And this week, for instance, I'm talking a lot about content, commerce, and creativity. And, how to read my LinkedIn is I'm not trying to sell things. I'm trying to work out ideas in my head. Over the next coming months, I'm going to do a series on marketplaces. I'm also going to do a lot more about content, commerce, and creativity. And coinciding with that, I've also got some new research being lined up with some really amazing people. So between now and the end of the year, you're going to see some new, fresh first-party research.
Amazing. Great, Colin. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, and thanks for having me on the show.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.